Hello, I'm Kelly Sadler. I am the commentary editor at the Washington Times, and this is Politically Unstable. Today, I am joined by Oleka. He is the CEO of the State Financial Officers Foundation. We are going to be talking waste, fraud, and abuse. It's happening in every state. Sometimes at differing levels. We saw an FBI raid in Minnesota where they're still uncovering fraudulent childcare, daycare centers, autistic centers. We've seen it in California when it comes to hospice fraud. OJ, why is this so prevalent?
Well, thank you for having me on your show. Sadly, it's prevalent because in our system, fraud has become a feature and not a bug. There really is an industry of people who decide they want to come to the United States, or they're already citizens here and they want to engage in the American public sense of charity, of genuine desire to help other people, and they want to steal from it. And as a result, you have this industry of fraud that's really been developed. And I am certainly one that wants to applaud the Vice President of the United States. I want to applaud our conservative state financial officers, the auditors, treasurers, and comptrollers who are trying to end this fraud industrial complex that exists. It's gone on far too long. And I'm excited we finally have people in government who are willing to do the work to stop it.
What happens between the breakdown of federal dollars going to states? I mean, let's use the case example of Minnesota. They were getting federal taxpayer monies. Is it then the state's responsibility to be good stewards of those taxpayer funds and make sure that they're being used how they are intended to be used? In the state of Minnesota, for example, it was for childcare and learning centers, or rather learning centers. Oftentimes, individuals applied for these federal dollars, said that they set up these centers, but they serviced no children. They were just there in name alone on the books, but getting millions of dollars annually. How does this happen, and where is the breakdown?
Well, unfortunately, the breakdown happens in a few different places. One, you've got the eligibility and verification portions on the front end, which the federal government, in terms of their federal agencies, they've got an opportunity and a responsibility to work through. So effectively, they're supposed to be looking to make sure that the people who are applying for these federal funds are actually eligible to get it and that they verify that eligibility. We've suggested, the State Financial Officers Foundation, my organization, we've suggested that there are ways that the agencies can talk better together in real time to effectively root out some of the fraudsters who go from agency to agency trying to steal monies. Then you get at the state level where that verification goes down to the states. They're the ones actually dispersing those funds to those organizations and to those individuals. That same kind of verification can happen there. And then also you've got good state auditors, or at least in the sense you should have good state auditors, who then on a regular basis are routinely auditing and examining to make sure, again, that that money is going the place that it ought to go. This is the problem in Minnesota and a number of our different states. In Minnesota, they don't have a state treasurer who's elected at all. And the auditor doesn't have the requisite authority to do this particular job well. So what we're excited about is that our state financial officers, again, that's your treasurer, your auditor, and your comptroller, our folks are conservatives. They're elected statewide, 41 of them across 28 different states. They actually take their job seriously. And what they do is they make sure that the treasurers on the front end, they do try to verify and make sure that there are good eligibility protocols in place. And then the auditors on the back end do their version of that too. It's why they found roughly $6 billion of improper payments, waste, fraud, and abuse that they stopped and called attention to in 2025. And why they found and safeguarded $28 billion overall for the American people. Our people work hard, they take their job seriously, and we need more of them across the states in the country.
Why does this seem to be a red state, blue state issue? Minnesota is obviously a blue state. You have the governor there, Tim Walz, and you have Keith Ellison as their AG. There was whistleblowers that came forward. This is not a new scandal over the years, alerting them of this potential fraud, but they did nothing about it. It seemed like they didn't care to do anything about it until the feds had to get actively involved.
Yeah, what we have found is that there are really three things that are required for a state auditor or a state treasurer or a state financial officer to root out fraud and to do it well. One, you need to actually have the knowledge and the tools. You need to recognize the things that you could actually do. Again, the verification and eligibility requirements on the front end, the auditing, the special examinations on the back end. You need to know what you're able to do. But you also need the statutory authority to be able to do it. And in a lot of cases, as I mentioned, the treasurer just doesn't exist in Minnesota and the auditor doesn't have the authority. So you may have the knowledge, but not the authority. And the third one, I think, is what's at play here, Kelly, is that you need the political incentive, or in a word, courage. You need to be in a position where you actually want to stand up for the American people. You actually want to benefit your constituents. And sadly, what we've seen is that in many states where fraud is rampant, where it is ugly and it is corrosive, they just don't have the political courage to do the right thing. But again, a lot of our folks do. When they've got the authority and they've got the knowledge of the policy, they act. In Kentucky, Auditor Allison Ball was able to find nearly $1 billion in improper Medicaid payments. She saw it and she acted. The same thing happened in North Carolina with Auditor Dave Bullock. He found hundreds of millions of dollars in improper payments in lapsed salaries. He acted on that. Shad White, the auditor in Mississippi, did the same thing with hundreds of millions of dollars he found in education and other state programs. So when you've got the right leadership and the skill set and the authority, good things can happen for the American people on this issue.
Where I find this all problematic is, like, in Minnesota, it was by and large the Somali community who was collecting all of these benefits and was defrauding the system. And you had the Democrats turn a blind eye to that, as they were their constituents and they wanted to win over that voting bloc. But everyone that was calling attention to this fraud, instead of approaching the situation like, okay, we need to clean the system, we need to clean the books, it was, no, you're a racist. You are spreading fear and hate and in sowing division in this country, when it really is, no, it's just, we want you to be a better custodian of our federal taxpayer monies. It's infuriating to pay your federal taxes and know that there was actual autism centers in the state of Minnesota that were servicing many young children that were put out of business because they couldn't get their hands on these funds.
Yep. It actually is a pretty unconscionable thing when you think about it. And I look at this from a couple of different perspectives, and you've outlined them both. We're talking about child learning centers, daycares, childcare providing locations, and opportunities for people with autism to get benefits and resources. These are real people who need real resources, who have parents who are struggling. And so, as a last resort, they look to their government. And what happens with those funds that they look to from their government? They get stolen. They get taken advantage of. And I find it to be, again, a completely ugly thing if you've got people who decided to come to this country to take advantage of our generous American system. Look, my parents came to this country before we were born from Nigeria. They came with nothing. And they worked hard through faith and hard work. They lived the American dream, and they gave me and my sisters a great opportunity. It makes me angry to think that there would be people out in the world who would come here and take advantage of that same system that gave my parents a great life, that have given me and my wife a great life, and is now giving my children a great life. I think it's wrong. I think it's awful. And it doesn't mean that if you think that it's wrong and it's awful, that you're racist. It means you care about the American people from all stripes, all backgrounds. And polling shows this. We've seen polling that will demonstrate that regardless of your political background, regardless of your income background, or if you receive benefits yourself, you know that fraud is bad. So it's a binary choice for our state financial officers, for myself, and thankfully, it's binary for the administration. You're either with the American people or you're with the fraudsters, regardless of where they come from. And the president, the vice president, and our state financial officers have chosen to be with the great American people.
How difficult is it to get at this fraud? California is another state. LA County in particular has rampant Medicaid fraud, a bunch of hospices that were set up that never cared for the elderly, that never had any patients on its rolls, that never really even had an office to service that was documented as not having that care. This is a state, and Gavin Newsom, a Democrat, who prides himself on these public services, is trying to get all the federal funds that he can. What prevented them? You had Dr. Oz come in, identify these centers, go take a tour, and just be like, there's 50 of them in this one, this one zoned out area. why aren't, our elected officials, given this case in California is a lot different than the Minnesota one, there is not the race angle. Why is it so hard for them to reach out to your organization and ask for help? Because that's what you hear from Gavin Newsom was, well, we've been working on this. We've been trying to tackle this. But it's really only until the federal government got involved that anyone even knew about these cases.
Well, you use the exact right word, and that's pride, because it's pretty obvious that if you keep requesting more and more funds for a specific program, again, if you've got the right leadership and you're not so prideful to think that government is the answer to every solution, then you'd actually try to solve the problem. That's the philosophical aspect here, is that you've got a lot of people who simply believe that government is the best answer to every problem. So as a result, they ask for the American people to pay more and more in taxes, to then spend more and more of it. And as a result, it leads to this affordability crisis because people's taxes have gone up and because things cost a lot more because there's so much money in the system because a lot of it is fraudulent. And look, it's not hard. You can work with the federal government directly. There's a position called the Inspector General that exists in every single agency within the federal government where you get federal benefits. There's a law called the Single Audit Act where every auditor or the person who has that authority in a state annually must submit an audit explaining exactly how well Medicaid specifically is doing. So you have this federal law and you've got federal actors. So if you're a state leader and you're doing the right thing and you actually care about taking care of the American people, then you would do the audit, you'd work with the federal government. But again, you've got these leaders like Tim Walz, like Gavin Newsom, who are simply more prideful than they ought to be. But again, as my good book tells me, pride comes before the fall. And that's what you're seeing right now. You're seeing these governors pay a high price for not doing their jobs well.
Well, and God forbid they work with the Trump administration or work with an opposing political party to solve an issue. The resistance has been so strong, and especially when it comes to Donald Trump. J.D. Vance has taken on this waste, fraud, and abuse task force. Where would you direct his attention first? It looks like they are going after, hospice fraud and Medicaid fraud in the state of California. But what are the big areas that he should specifically be looking at?
Well, we've actually been fortunate to talk with the senior leadership of the task force to eliminate fraud. And again, obviously, those are private conversations, but I'll tell you the part that I think is most relevant to your question. We said you should work with us. You should be in a position to be able to work with your state partners on the ground. And all of our folks are willing. And like I said, we've had some great conversations on that from an auditing and treasury management perspective to deal with some of those controls. But what you can do is you can effectively have an all flanks approach in this project. You can tackle specific programmatic fraud. So again, that's Medicaid, Medicare, SNAP, unemployment insurance. That's more of a state issue, but there are all kinds of different programs that you can tackle for fraud, but also the methodology. You've got the methodological fraud. Is it verification based? Is it eligibility based? Is there a specific ring or profile of folks who go from agency to agency? There are different ways that we can work together. And a lot of that deals with the technology piece. There is a program at the federal level or an initiative called Do Not Pay, which effectively has a number of individuals and businesses that make it clear these folks are subject potentially to fraud. So you shouldn't give any opportunities in terms of benefits to them. With states having better access to that and then also data sharing with the federal government, you can expand that list. You can improve real-time capturing of fraud again before it even starts. And then also you can work to claw back the money on the back end. So those are different ways that we've suggested to the task force, also to Congress. Auditor Allison Ball, again, of Kentucky, and myself were able to testify a couple weeks ago and make that point. There are ways that exist already within the authorities that the federal government has and state leaders have, like our state financial officers, to work together to root out fraud. So that was well received. Chairman James Comer of the Oversight Committee has actually put forward some bills that respond to this very question. And look, he's doing an incredible job as well. He was the one that brought a lot of this to the forefront at the federal level with his oversight hearings. So when you've got great leadership like Congressman Comer, who is my congressman, like I said, doing a great job in Congress, and you've got great leadership like Vice President Vance and our great state financial officers, we're finally in a position where we can start rooting this stuff out. And I'm glad to see that's happening.
Well, we certainly don't lack the tools or the knowledge or the know-how, and your organization can help. It's just the political will, it seems like, of a lot of elected leaders in choosing to tackle this or not to. And we wish the vice president the best of luck. Elon Musk kind of started it from a technological standpoint, and hopefully J.D. Vance will finish it. But OJ, Oleka, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Kelly. Great to be with you.